Powered by the Montana Television Network. This is the 530 News on Q2, Montana's news leader.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Russ Riesinger.
And I'm Jeanelle Slade. As our country reels from the two latest mass shooting tragedies, Montana law enforcement is on a mission to prepare for the worst.
Just days after those two shootings claimed the lives of dozens of people in Texas and Ohio, Montana State University police and other agencies team up to train for a similar situation close to home.
Now, today's annual training, sponsored by the FBI, carried a little extra weight.
MTN's Cody Boyer was on MSU's campus where he took part in that exercise.
Hey, give us your hands! Let me see your hands! Show us your hands!
Officers have to be aggressive, they have to go towards the shooter, and they have to stop the killing as quickly as possible.
Calls of violence like in El Paso, Texas or Dayton, Ohio, the kind no one wants to hear. Those are the calls police have to be ready for.
Unfortunately, in this day and age, school shootings and public shootings are part of what's going on.
A poignant realization, according to MSU Dean of Students Matt Kairos. Trainings like these are necessary.
Anybody else in here? Can you speak up?
It's critical. MSU being ready and having the ability to respond, we're talking nearly 17,000 young people in a very confined space.
We're actually using ammunition called simunitions.
From the type of bullets to the screams, the scenarios are designed this way for a reason.
Since Columbine, law enforcement response to active shooters has changed dramatically. We no longer can wait for backup, and so an officer may have to go in solo and engage an active shooter, and that's why this training is so important.
Just being a part of one drill shows the intensity, a fraction of what it would be like for the real thing.
It does hurt when you get hit with those rounds, and it's designed to hurt for a reason. We want officers to understand that there's consequences for a bad decision.
Now, as you can see, these trainings, these sessions that they're doing are highly realistic. I'm wearing all of this for my own safety. These scenarios train them in case the worst happens, they can act quickly.
Being ready as a team, answering the most terrifying calls. Chief Parrish says all they can do is stay ahead of any future danger.
I don't have the words to describe how I feel every time I see one of these active shooter news stories. It breaks my heart, and it makes me wonder, where are we headed as a nation? And what are we going to do to stop this?
If you see more police in this area, namely the west side of campus and around Roski Hall, that's why. The training will continue until Thursday. At MSU, Cody Boyer, MTN News.
All right, thanks so much, Cody.
Well, those recent mass shootings have left a lot of us wondering, what if it should happen here?
It's something Billings Police Chief Rich St. John was asked about during last night's City Council work session.
Are we prepared for an active shooter situation?
We certainly are. You always hope that it's never going to happen, and in today's day and age, it's not a matter of if, it's when. We train to a standard, and the active shooter is the highest standard that we train to.
Billings Police will be going through more active shooter training later this week at the Billings Career Center, along with Billings Fire and other agencies.
Well, Governor Steve Bullock has his own ties to a shooting death when one of his nephews was shot and killed in 1994 on a school playground in Butte. Today, the governor and presidential candidate sat down with CNN to talk about how that shooting changed his perspective and what he hopes for in the future.
The trauma isn't just for families, the trauma is for communities. Some people say thoughts and prayers, and then we seem to just want to move on to the next one. If we don't keep trying to make sure that someday there won't be a family that deals with either what our family dealt with, or that a family in Ohio or a family in El Paso has dealt with, well then we're not just failing today, we're failing tomorrow.
A new national poll out today does not give Bullock any traction in his bid for president. The Quinnipiac University poll shows Bullock with less than 1% of support from Democratic voters. He's among a dozen candidates that don't poll over 1%. Vice President Joe Biden continues to lead the race at 32%, with Elizabeth Warren showing the biggest gain up to 21%. Now, these national polls are important to second-tier candidates as they must poll at least 2% in 4 national polls to qualify for the September debates in Houston.
President Trump announced another round of $300 billion in tariffs on Chinese goods last week to pressure the nation into a trade agreement.
In return, China announced it will suspend imports of U.S. agricultural commodities. The Montana Ag Network's Lane Nordland shares more.
As the trade war with China continues, Beijing is focusing on rural America by placing tariffs on agricultural products, predominantly corn, soybeans, and pork.
So basically what China did, and they kind of clarified their stance to the U.S. Trade Representative here this morning, is that they're not necessarily suspending all agricultural imports, but what they're doing is they are removing any tariff exemptions that they had placed on U.S. agricultural products. And that's something they had done as a kind of a show of good faith during the negotiation. But after the latest tariff escalation, that has been undone.
While Montana's production of corn, soybeans, and pork is relatively small, a prolonged trade war will have a trickle-down effect on all of U.S. agriculture.
A lot of that is going to have impacts on domestic prices here at home because a lot of United States corn was grown and fed to United States pigs. Also some things to watch, and there are some wheat exports that go over there, not a ton, but some. This is really going to have a wide-ranging impact on American agriculture.
Data from the American Farm Bureau Federation shows that in 2014, U.S. ag exports to China exceeded $24 billion, but from 2017 to 2018, those exports fell more than 50%, dropping to $9.1 billion. The Montana Farm Bureau said agriculture has been patient during the trade spat, but is starting to feel the effects of it. They remain hopeful an agreement will come soon.
Trade is very important to Montana's farmers and ranchers, obviously. Being able to export them and finding new markets for them is very important. Maintaining the markets that we have is also important, but we recognize the importance of getting these trade agreements right and getting a chance to level the playing field to make sure that in the long run, we're able to maintain markets, but also trade fair for farmers and ranchers and for the United States as a whole.
Reporting, Lane Nordland, MTN News.
Well, agriculture is hopeful that if Congress ratifies the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement and strikes a new trade deal with Japan, that China will be compelled to end the trade war.
Well, there's more news from across our state on tonight's MTN 9 o'clock news. We'll have the latest on the horsefly fire near Helena as evacuations are in place tonight. That's coming up at 9 o'clock right here on the CW.
But first, on tonight's 5:30 news, with school starting in a matter of weeks, whooping cough is making a resurgence in one part of the state. We'll have the latest on that.
And later in sports, she accepted a full ride today playing basketball for the Lady Grizz, and she's only 15. Scott chats with Maya Hansen.
And coming up in weather, looks like more smoke than rainfall is starting to make its way into the region. You'll notice just a few spotty sprinkles. We'll have more coming up in a few more minutes.
You're watching MTN News with Jeanelle Slade and Russ Riesinger. Storm Tracker weather with Bob McGuire. And sports with Scott Green. This is the 5:30 news on Q2, Montana's news leader.